I'm Nathan Marke and I'm the Chief Digital Officer of the Daisy Group. So I sit on the board of Daisy and I'm responsible for our technology strategy. I'm also responsible for all our products and our platforms. And it's my job really to be the technologist on a board of directors to make sure that we steer the right path and use technology to improve our business, but also to improve our customers' businesses. That's my role. I put this slide deck together about a year ago, and it's had all sorts of uses. And I update it quite regularly, so I've tried to bring it up to speed to make it as relevant as possible with some of the news that you've all heard. But I think talking about news, the really interesting thing for me about digital transformation is it's one of those words, right? One of those phrases, digital transformation, digital disruption, that we're hearing about all the time, aren't we? And it's kind of come out of the cupboard of being something in IT to something affecting everything. It's affecting every business, but it's also, of course, affecting our consumer life, right? Most importantly, it's really affecting how we are as consumers. But there's something that really bugs me about digital transformation and about digital disruption, and that's that I think in the UK we do that thing that we do in the UK where we've got some of the best and most brilliant ideas, but actually we beat ourselves up about it and we think about digital transformation, don't we, as the stuff that Apple does or the stuff that Netflix does or the stuff that Airbnb does. But you know, and when you think about those businesses and what they do, they're quite abstract, aren't they? They're in a very specific market where digital means an awful lot. But you're AMC, right? And you know, you've got 18 businesses that do everything from extraction to, you know, to metal things that you sell, right? How on earth does digital transformation apply to that? And it really annoys me that actually I think we are surrounding this whole digital transformation thing in real complexity, because I don't think it is all that complex. I do think there's a formula for understanding how you can apply the technologies that are available now in digital to really help your business to disrupt. So with this presentation, what I've tried to do is kind of go right from the highest level of my view of what's happening in the market, right at the top level of the economy, thinking about some of these real poster businesses for digital disruption and talk a bit about those. But then I want to come all the way down into the UK, because what I've done is I've spent quite a lot of time with a lot of Daisy customers in the UK, understanding their digital transformation journey in all sorts of sectors. And I've tried to understand what they're doing and how they're doing it. And the whole point is really to try and democratize this thing so that you know, you can hopefully leave listening to this and think, actually in AMC, we really can do some interesting things to disrupt our business and to compete moving forwards. And if I achieve just a little bit of that, then I guess I've succeeded today. Maybe that's a bit of a grand hope for what we're trying to do. So let me kick off. I've called this presentation Dream Big because I want people to dream big about this stuff, right? To realise that it's in our own control to deliver digital disruption. So let me sort of dive in. This is a bit of a jokey one, really, but you know, it wasn't in my lifetime, but the biggest example I think ever of humans dreaming big was this, right? It was the moonshot. I think it was 1961. JFK announced to the American people we're going to put a man on the moon. And it took a long time. Unfortunately, JFK did never see the dream country, but in '69, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. Amazing. And of course, what was really interesting about achieving that was that it was a real tin can and string operation, wasn't it? You know, computers were in their infancy, and yet we achieved something as extraordinary as that with really basic technology. Now, technology is, you know, screamed on, and it's a lot more advanced now than it was in 1969. So I can completely understand why people kind of look at digital transformation and say, well, what's the big deal? Because all we ever hear about, right, in digital transformation is, you know, ways to replace your lovely black cab with a Toyota Prius, right? That's Uber. Or, you know, booking a really, really rubbish bedroom, second bedroom on the Isle of Wight for your holiday with Airbnb. I don't want to play down what these platforms are doing in digital, but to think that Airbnb and Uber and Netflix are digital transformation, I think would be to completely miss the point. They're very important examples, but they're just examples in a particular sector of disruption, and there will be really good examples everywhere you look. So if I go right the way up, and what I'm trying to do here is talk a bit higher than digital transformation in terms of what I see as the very big change that's going on in the economy. And this is really a move to what people are calling the subscription economy. I guess the way to describe this is this general move that we see all over the world in every industry, from selling products to selling services. This is a very big trend we're seeing happen. So if you cast your mind back to, you know, the early 20th century when Henry Ford produced the Model T Ford, it was a wonderful invention, right? And what an amazing thing. But it was not really designed with the consumer or the customer in mind. He wanted to build a car and build it en masse. And you could have whatever you wanted in a Model T Ford, so long as it was black, right? That was the deal with the Model T Ford. So you know, for years and years and years, ever since the start of the 20th century, we've been building products, and we've not really been building products with the consumer in mind. We've been building products, stacking them high in our warehouses, in our, you know, building big inventories, and then getting them out the door as quickly as we can. That's been the model of 21st century, you know, the economics of product building. What's changing here, and really what digital transformation is underpinning, is this move to the subscription economy. And what I mean by that is this big change from having a standard product that you buy to something that actually is becoming much more bespoke to you. Now, there's loads of examples of this that you'll see all the time. In fact, I wrote a few down on the train this morning. These are all examples of subscriptions that you can now buy. So these are products turned into subscriptions that all have more than 1 million subscribers around the world already. So here's a list, right? I couldn't remember it, so I've written it down. Apps on your smartphone. Everyone knows about that, right? Yep, lots of subscription services on your phone. Bike rental. Do you know there's more than 1 million people in the world that subscribe online to bike rental services around in big cities? Video's obvious, right? Netflix and co. Cloud file sharing. That's a really big one, right? Everyone now is using subscription services like Box and so on to do file sharing and data storage. Connected cars. More than 1 million subscriptions to connected car services. Most of the cars that are being produced now and going out into the market have SIM cards in and are being connected to somewhere else to deliver updates to the car. I'll talk more about that later. Beauty boxes. Anyone have beauty boxes delivered to them? There you go. Over 1 million of you buying beauty boxes. Razors. Anyone got a razor subscription? Contact lenses. Yeah, another big one. In fact, I was on the tube this morning. I saw the advert there for contact lenses. Personalised news. Custom workouts. How about that? You know, you want to do a workout, you can subscribe to a website, it gives you workouts that help you to keep fit. Songs is an obvious one, right? You know, all the music download services like Spotify, Apple Music and so on. Here's one I didn't know about. I don't think this is available in the UK, but did you know that there are more than 1 million subscriptions worldwide to a service that allows you to skip airport security queues? Did you know that?
Fast track.
Yeah, well, fast track services, but subscriptions in the US apparently is really common now. So you don't have to go through standard security. You can just bolt through, and you're pre-cleared. Gourmet meals. That's what I do. I've got a recipe box that comes through every week, and me and my wife make the meals. Cyber security is an obvious one. Really big one I think that's coming up is smart homes. Loads and loads of technology and loads of innovation coming into smart homes with smart metering and so on. I'll talk a bit more about that later. Look. You get the idea, right? But I think what's really interesting for me about this is that this is coming fast, and there's a little game you can play if you're really sad like me. Just try and play a little game maybe a bit later. Try and think of a product in the world that you could not turn into or somehow attach a subscription to. It's a really, really hard one. I've never actually managed to do it. I thought I had one with the floor. You can't turn the floor into a subscription. And then I was given a talk at a conference, and someone put their hand up and said, yeah, no, Nathan, you can. And we were in the NEC at the time. He said, well, the NEC actually has a subscription for floor tiles. So there is a business, and when a floor tile goes wrong, they swap it, and they just pay a price per tile per month as the service. So, you know, there's literally nothing, you know, I don't think there's anything that isn't being turned into a subscription. The really interesting thing for me is how you turn it into a subscription. Okay, how do you turn an AMC product today into something that's more like a subscription? And this is really where digital technology comes in, because what in effect we're doing in all of these examples is we're taking a product, but we're starting to gather data from that product, aren't we? And then we're trying to understand that data, and then we're trying to tether that product to some sort of service in the cloud, some sort of digital experience, putting the two together and then coupling them to make that product better, to make it more bespoke to you as a user using that data, and then to turn the way that you pay for it from a one-off purchase into a subscription. That's kind of the trend that we're seeing. It's massive. The world economy is $80 trillion last year. Subscriptions now represent over 500 billion of that. So it's a small part of the world economy at the moment, but actually it's coming really fast, right? Few kind of notes on this, right? This is about moving from ownership to outcomes, because I think we don't want the record, do we? Well, a lot of us have the record. Look at my age. I still really like vinyl, but most people want to listen to the music. They don't want the record. Similar thing with cars, right? We don't want to own the car. We actually want the ride. We want the milk, not the cow. Yeah, it's this is this big move in terms of value from ownership to outcomes. And of course, you could argue that ownership is actually a very inefficient and very unenvironmental thing to do, whereas rental and services are actually a much more sustainable way of us all being, right? Other things about this, one size fits all to personalise. You think about this one size fits all to personalise thing and the big thing that's happened. I started off by talking about Henry Ford and the Model T Ford. You think about what Tesla is doing with the car. It's still a car, just like the Model T was, but because it's tethered to the internet, and because it's always constantly gathering data about you and how you use the car, it's updating all the time, right? Another thing you will have, I'm still on an iPhone 8, this phone, I don't think I need to replace anymore. I'm sorry, Apple, but actually the really important thing for me is that I get the latest software subscription, I get the latest OS downloaded, and it gives me everything we want. So it's much less about the ownership, and it's much more about the services that I get on top of this that become interesting. That's I think a big change that's happening. But what this really means, I think, is that we have to understand our customers a lot better. So one of the most important lessons we get out of this move to digital is the need to understand your customers in a much more innate way than you ever thought. I'll talk about that as we go through the journey. Obsolescence to continuous improvement, that's the thing about the car, right? You wake up in the morning with a Tesla and suddenly it's an automated vehicle because they've downloaded the new capability. And last but not least, volume at heart to the customer at heart. So this is no longer about stacking products high and then hoping you can ship your inventory to make a profit. This is about putting the customer at the heart and then making constant, continuous improvements to the way that your service works. And we see that in every industry. That's the kind of trend. Why should you do it? Because it's better, right? I mean, it's not always the case. It's nice to own things, right? But we are voting with our credit cards and we're voting with our feet, because subscription services across the world, whether it's business to business to consumer, whatever, are incredibly popular. Subscription business is growing 9 times faster than product companies at the moment. And every single big product company out there is trying to do this. And it's not just products, companies like AMC, I'm sure you've got a mix of products and services. It's really thinking through, how can I put the customer at the heart of what I do, and how can I use technology to transform my products and my experiences. There will be great opportunities in AMC to do that. So for me, that's the kind of highest level of this move from products to services, and this idea about the subscription economy rather than the product economy is the big change I think we're seeing. Underneath that, what I wanted to do was talk a bit about the technology that is enabling this. But I won't get too geeky with you, I hope, because this is technology I think we're all seeing in our consumer lives. So let's have a think about, I think there are 5 key technologies here that are really driving this change. The first one is the cloud, right? Everyone know what the cloud is, I guess? It's just a data center full of computers, really. It's no different from your data center here, but they're massive scale, right? The thing for me about the cloud is what it does is it democratizes and makes it really easy for any business, whether you're really tiny or really large, to tap into unlimited computing power wherever you are. We've never had that before. It's like having wherever you are above your head, having a big piece of computing power to do whatever you want to do. Okay, really big advancements happening in the cloud all the time. The second big one is this huge leap forward we're making in mobile technology. So you've all heard about 5G, of course. There were some big auctions earlier this year when they were auctioning out more of the 5G spectrum. The first trials of 5G in the labs are happening now. Next year we will start to see the first rollouts, and of course in London you'll see some of the very early use cases and opportunities to use 5G. The reason I think that is really important is because you can't use subscription services in any context without connectivity, right? Without the data behind it, yeah? To give you a feeling for 5G, so if I stand in a field and I can see a mobile mast 100 metres away and I'm on 4G, I'll get about 100 meg synchronous bandwidth today, okay? When 5G comes out in that same scenario, I've got a 10x amount of bandwidth. So I'll have more than a gigabit of bandwidth, synchronous bandwidth, available to me up to the mast in optimal conditions. I did a bit of maths on that, and that would enable me to stream at the same time 25 high definition videos onto my phone, should I really want to do that, right? Now that's impressive. But if you then start to think about the context of that in terms of every application you can think of and how we connect not just us, but things, devices, everything like that into the cloud, we start to see a really interesting change going on. So the mobile networks and all this mobile innovation is really important. The next one is social. Now I'm not a big fan of social, to be honest with you. I think I've got a Facebook account when it first arrived in the UK a few years back, and shut it off pretty quickly. I don't like personally using a social network, just a privacy point for me. But I think there is a very interesting thing about social and what it's done, and we've seen a lot of really interesting applications of social, I think, for human good. Yeah, the Arab Spring was a good example, I think, that people talk about, right? But you know, drug development is a really good one. I'll talk a bit about that later. The ability for us to connect to every single human being, all 7 billion people connected on the planet, know about them, know about what they are, know about their skills, know about their capability, and then be able to share that as a human, you know, as a human organism, if you like, be able to share all that, I think, is an amazing capability. So social networking, I think, is an important part of this. The next one, which is this wave that is kind of coming, is the Internet of Things, right? Everyone presumably heard of the phrase, the Internet of Things, right? Internet of Things, right at the heart of it, is about the development of sensors. So tiny little microsensors that are becoming incredibly cheap. They power themselves, and they can go into anything, and they can gather data about the thing that they're connected to that can then be usefully used to change the product in that thing to it being a service, right? So sensors are a really important part of this. Gartner reckon that there will be more than 50 billion connected things connected to the internet without any humans touching it by 2020, 50 billion things. So that's huge, right? And last but not least, big data. So what do we mean by big data? Well, if you think about sensors, they're gathering lots of data. Big data is really our ability to gather data on massive, massive scales and deal with it and present it to algorithms so that they can do useful things with it. So if we kind of, you know, in any walk of life, you know, if you're just using your phone and you think about these things, you can kind of go, yeah, I get that. You know, I see that these technologies are all available. What's interesting for me is that it's when they're used together that they become really interesting, because we now have a situation where 50 billion things and 7 billion people are connected with unlimited bandwidth, anytime, any place, anywhere, to unlimited computing power, and we now have the ability to understand what all that data is that's collected around it. Now that's the platform of digitization for me. That's the platform that creates the opportunity for us to change our businesses, disrupt our businesses, and move from products to services and so on. That for me is the technology basis behind this. But we have a problem, right? We've got a real problem with this, and the fundamental problem is us as humans, because what we are not very good at is dealing with data. My CFO accepting, who's extraordinarily good at dealing with data in spreadsheets, most human beings can't deal with massive amounts of data, right? It turns out that computers are brilliant at handling large amounts of data. We're good at blue sky thinking, fortunately, which computers are terrible at. So I don't quite foresee a time when we'll be retired just yet. But you know, we're fundamentally not very good at dealing with large amounts of data. And really, all of the wave of innovation that's happening in Cambridge and in Silicon Valley and all around the world is really about how, now that we've got this platform in place with networks and clouds and big data available, it's how do we then use that data to change something? And this, you know, how do we change something? And this is where we see the concepts of machine learning, the Internet of Things, advanced analytics, and artificial intelligence coming out. To take all of that data and to turn it into really, really useful things that can change something for the better. And I want to give you a few examples of this if I can. So the first one is bots, right? Now, whether you like it or not, we're already all pretty augmented by technology, aren't we? You know, we've all got one of these, and it does stuff for us, right? You get notifications, and we're already kind of becoming a bit mechanized, aren't we? Or we've already got an implant. But this is really just the start, right? And bots, I think, have really taken a rise over the last year. If you think about bots as the new applications, what all of the application providers are doing is they're infusing their apps with artificial intelligence. And the idea behind that artificial intelligence is to do things on your behalf to make your life easier, right? So, you know, scheduling your calendar, calculating your journeys, paying your bank balance, notifying you if something happens. It's almost like having, you know, walking PA, isn't it, behind you that's helping you to make your life more efficient. That's where we're seeing artificial intelligence come in that particular example. But there are loads of examples of this. When I first put this presentation together, it was November the year before last, just when Alexa hit the shops. And it became a massive phenomenon that Christmas, and it's carried on. They reckon that in the first year, over the first Christmas period, Amazon sold over 1 million Alexas. I hate the things, but you know, this is a device that can listen to us in our home, and then it can kind of, you know, go out, search the internet, apply algorithms to it, and feed information back to us. So is it listening? I don't know. But there are all sorts of, there's a whole ecosystem of stuff that's developed around Alexa, around the API. Smart clocks, smart ovens, you know, all the other things, you know, smart utilities, all these things are being connected to Alexa to change the kind of interface using artificial intelligence. And it is changing a lot of our lives if you allow it into your house. A big one I confess, is I went to Sicily on holiday this year. I don't speak any Italian. My French is okay, but my Italian's awful. And I'm ashamed to say in a restaurant I did get Skype Translator out when there was just like an impossible situation where we couldn't work something out. And have any of you tried a translator? They are really incredible now. I think they're incredible for two reasons. Firstly, because the natural language is so good. You can speak into it, it just gets it. I mean, if anyone's got Apple TV, anything like that, you know, we're all using that kind of natural speech ability and speech to text ability. But this is so fast now. You know, select English to Italian, speak in, and it immediately will speak the Italian in not bad Italian to the person you're speaking with, you know. And that kind of, you know, draws into question our children's education, doesn't it? Because, you know, when I was at school, I learned French and Latin. I think I did Latin. But you know, and you had to do it as part of the curriculum. I think moving forward, the question will be, you may want to learn a language at school, but you won't have to, because the computers are going to do that for us. Yeah, you may want to learn a language, but perhaps you won't have to. And to give you a kind of feel for where this is going, this thing SQUAD, the Stanford Question and Answer data set, I think is a really interesting thing, because AI is developing really, really fast, the ability for computers to work more like human beings. And this particular test, I think, is a really interesting one. So in Stanford, they developed a test that tried to work out, tried to make a measure, really, of is a machine capable of doing cognitive things that humans can do. So what they do is they take they get two bits they get a piece they get like an extract from a story or from a journal or something like that, and it's a page, right, and it's an in-depth piece of text, okay, and you read that piece of text, and then what happens is you'll then ask questions about the text, but you're not asked the really easy questions about the text, like what colour was the dog. You're asked other questions that mean that you have to have an innate understanding of what the text is saying. You have to pick up the nuance, which are things humans are really good at. Right? What's the plot? Right? Computers have always been really rubbish at that. Last year, very scarily, oh no, not last year, earlier this year, so I think it was April, May this year, both Alibaba and Microsoft's AI engines, for the first time, beat a human being at the SQUAD test, which is a really interesting point that we've reached, where AI is becoming seriously good at doing stuff that humans have taken for granted for a very long time. It's becoming seriously good. But what's also interesting about what Alibaba, Microsoft and co are doing is they're making it seriously good, but they're trying to make it easier for us as businesses to access. So we can now go into Microsoft, Alibaba clouds, Amazon clouds, and we can access artificial intelligence services, and we can apply it to our data to start asking questions of our data in a way that we could never do before. And it's really straightforward to do. It's not hard to do. So you can start to get AIs working on your behalf in a business or a consumer context to start to see what you can do with it. Yeah. So that's a kind of a brief thing about artificial intelligence. It's massive, it's everywhere, you'll hear a lot about it, just a little reflection on it. Next one. I originally called this smart agriculture, but I've changed it actually, because I think this is kind of a reflection on artificial intelligence again, and big data, I think, is this idea that using big data and artificial intelligence, we can start to challenge human gut instinct, okay? The story here is smart agriculture, okay? So for years and years and years, ever since humans kind of came out of caves, we've been planting fields, and over all that time, farmers have developed huge amounts of knowledge, innate knowledge, about their crops and the seasons, and they're brilliant at it, aren't they? And it's all in their heads. It's all in their heads. And they know that if they rotate their crops and they water at this time of year, they get a yield. Well, computers are of course coming in now, big in the States, but also quite big in the Far East now, where farmers are putting sensors out in the field, and those sensors are analysing things like nitrogen content, water content, and so on, and they're bringing all that back into a central hub so that they can start to apply algorithms to it and work out actually when's the best time to water, what is the optimum nitrogen content, and making sure that we only put the amount of water on we need, we don't overwater, we put the right amount of nitrogen in, we don't leave the plant with less nitrogen, and it's raising yields, okay? I think that's a really interesting story, but what's more interesting for me is it's starting to make us realise that artificial intelligence and the way it works can actually be better than the received wisdom that we've had as humans for years, farmers in this case. I found another sorry, so this story, this was one that was about 3 weeks ago. So Jersey in the Channel Islands announced that they connected the island completely. So they made a massive investment. Everyone's got high-speed fibre and high-speed broadband across the island, which is great, right? So you can all watch Netflix faster in your home. What I thought was more interesting was that they focused on the icon of Jersey, the Jersey cow, and they said this is how fibre broadband is really affecting the lives, businesses in Jersey. And what they've done is they've got connected cows in farms in Jersey, and those cows have sensors attached to them, and those sensors are telling us lots of information about the cow. How is the cow? What's its temperature? Is it eating? Where's it moving? All the rest of those things, and that data is coming back, and they're using that to make the yields of milk in Jersey cows more effective. But it's using that high-speed infrastructure. So that was their kind of poster story for why Jersey has gone to high-speed broadband. Not just so we can, do faster games at home, but so that the cows can have more yield, right? So this is another one that I picked up. I don't know whether this is actually not. This isn't actually the story, but all of the tragic news in London over the last few months about the rise in knife crime has been a big thing in the press, right? There was a very, very big experiment that was then put into action in New York a couple of years ago, and what it was trying to do, because New York had a very similar knife crime problem to London, and the mayor, is it Giuliani, isn't it, and the team around have done loads and loads of work using big data to try to work out where knife crime is happening and how we use data to solve the problem. And we've now got this problem in the UK. The big problem we've got in the UK is that the infrastructure in the Met Police is so dated that actually we can't get the data out of these systems to then apply the algorithms to try and work out how we solve knife crime. I think the interesting thing for me about this is that we're very proud of our bobbies on the beat, aren't we? And the bobby on the beat will tell you, I've walked this patch for 20 years and I know everybody and I know exactly where the knife crime is going to happen. And they've been planning their police tactics for years around exactly that, around human gut instinct about how they should police. What they found in New York was that the data told them something very different. It told them that actually where they thought the knife crimes were happening wasn't actually where they were happening. And so what the Met Police now should be doing, if they had the data, is doing what they've done in New York, and that's to use the data to then think differently about how they apply their logistics, where they put their police forces and so on. So that's happening in the US, and in the UK is being held back by the problems with investment in IT in the Met Police. Okay, next one. This is my favourite one, autonomous vehicles. Did anyone see Elon Musk tweeted a picture of a mug that was sat on his desk, and the mug said electric cars are really fab because they run on electricity, and everyone knows that electricity is built by magic. I thought that was really, really wonderful, because actually, autonomous vehicles sound great, right? Because they're really great for the environment, but we've got to find and produce the electricity somewhere, right? So are we moving the problem? Anyway, I love autonomous vehicles and the concept of them. This, was late last year, and this was Elon Musk, and he was announcing his new automated lorries. Autonomous vehicle lorries that were going to hit the US. And no one was expecting this little thing. So he showed off the lorry and then opened the back of the lorry, and out rolled this. And this was the new version of the Tesla Roadster. And this car apparently is hitting the market next year, the year after. It will cost, I think it's $70,000, $80,000. It's a lot of money, right? A lot of money for first of all, but its performance is extraordinary. A range of 600 miles on a single charge, and it will go 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds. 1.9 seconds. If you like cars, that's faster than any production Ferrari on the road. That's extraordinary. This thing's hitting the market soon. But of course, in here is software, right? Clever software. And it's packed with sensors, and it's enabling us to think about autonomous vehicles and autonomous driving. I'll talk more about this a bit later, actually, with one of Daisy's customers. I saw something very interesting on the BBC last week. BBC website was talking about electric cars. You've probably all heard the debate and about when it's going to arrive. But this bit I picked out was really interesting, because you think we're in 2018 now, and there's just diesel and petrol cars everywhere, all over the place, right? This was in 1908 in Fifth Avenue, I think it was. And it's all horses and carriages, right? This was a picture, 22 years later, in the same street. Not a horse in sight, all cars. And what people are saying is that actually, there is a whole massive build-up now, and that over the next 20 years, not only will electric vehicles completely take over from traditional vehicles, but also that we'll move towards autonomous vehicles, and that change will happen within our lifetime. I've got 4 young kids. Oldest one is 9, and I'm seriously wondering whether they'll ever need to take their driving test, because that's 8 years away. I can absolutely see a model where you go onto a website and you say, I'd like to go from here to here, please. I'd like the car to arrive in 5 minutes on my app. Car turns up, takes me to my journey completely safely, no emissions, with a subscription service, right? This is absolutely something that I think we can now see very clearly coming down the line. I'll talk a bit about what Daisy customer is doing in this in a sec. Healthcare. Here's an interesting one. So I think there's a couple of things on healthcare that I call out. The first one is using digital technology. The pharmaceutical companies are actually driving the speed of research much faster than they have been able to do in the past. And the reason is that using digital technology, using the internet, researchers in Brazil and the US and the UK and Germany and the Far East can all work together and collaborate on projects in a way that they never did. And that is speeding up the speed of drug research. But I think there's a lot of other interesting things happening here. I'll talk a bit later about a Daisy customer, Sanger, and what they're doing with the Human Genome Project, which is really driven by technology that's helping us to unravel and decode DNA. Headline I saw not long ago this year, Bill Gates, lovely Bill Gates from Microsoft, he kind of would say this, wouldn't he? Because he's a technologist. But he's forecasting that using nanotechnology, tiny little nanobots that are able to go into the body, he's forecasting that within 20 years there's going to be a cure for cancer, a cure for chronic illness and so on, all by using digital technology that we implant into our bodies. And there's obviously tons of research going on into this right now, and things being developed all the time. So, there are some really interesting big human upsides from leveraging this technology and the way that we research medicine to deliver breakthrough drug treatments. Last one. You're in the financial services, Mark, right? We're in the square mile here. I know you've had a talk fairly recently about blockchain, so I'm not intending to talk about blockchain at all. I get it. I think there's an amazing opportunity there with a super encrypted ledger in the cloud that enables us to build a digital system of trust. I think that's an amazing thing. I thought I'd have a bit of a giggle with this one actually, because when I first wrote this presentation last year, Kodak, had announced a big story about blockchain, it made me laugh because, you know, we think about Kodak, don't we, as the, you know, one of the biggest businesses in the world 20 years ago, but the poster child in a bad way for digital disruption. Because the story is that, you know, they were all into print photography, didn't see digital photography coming, didn't get it right, and actually the business collapsed, right? And, you know, filed for bankruptcy, you know, about 15 years ago. What I found interesting about this is, so this is Kodak's headquarters, which is in Eastman, just outside New York. And this, you know, this building was obviously massive because it used to be the headquarters of one of the biggest businesses in the world. They've got massive generators in here. They can generate huge amounts of power. And one of the things that you can use that power for is to mine bitcoins. You can develop the ledger, right? And so they announced last year that they were going to use all the power generation capability they had here to do mining for Bitcoin services and renting mining by the hour, which I thought was brilliant. The more interesting disruption I think that's happening in financial services is around, you know, this idea of challenger banks, and we see lots of that happening around here. This one in particular, has anyone got a Monzo card? Anyone got the red Monzo card? Good experience? Yeah. Yeah. I found this one absolutely fascinating, right? And I found it fascinating not because it's a really nice app, right? And it's really smart and it's much better than anything else I've seen from any of the big high street banks. If the guys show you the app, it's extraordinary, it's brilliant, really simple. What I found interesting about this is the way that they're innovating. So the story goes that last year, Monzo didn't have anything. Didn't have any capability at all. What they did was that they built a minimum viable product that didn't exist. What they did is they sent out some emails and some digital marketing to people saying, coming soon, the Monzo card. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. You are now 30,000th in the queue to get your Monzo card, and it's going to change your world. What it then said underneath was, if you tell 10 of your mates about this, then I'm going to move you up the queue. By 10,000 or whatever it is, right? So what they did is they got this thing going where they got everybody to tell their mates about this amazing viral network. I don't know if that's how you found out about it, through a mail from somebody else. Before they even produced their product, they'd raised tens of millions of pounds. Because they could go to the investors and they could say, look, we've got a captive audience of people that are desperate for our savings account. Brilliant. And then they finally produced their app. The good news is the app was brilliant. It is fantastic. Really, really simple app. It's the best thing I've ever seen for personal banking. You know, you get your account balance at the top. Really, really nice little graphical picture at the top about how you're doing. You know, how your spending's going. Whenever you get a spend come in, you know, when you use your Apple Pay or whatever, instant transaction details come through. You can tag it. It's just brilliant. It's just like so much better than anything I get from First Direct, who I've been banking with for a long time.
Can I just ask, sorry to interrupt, that for me is why it's interesting, because you have instantaneous updates of your spending.
Yeah.
Technologically, what is it that prevents all of the other high street banks from copying? Because none of them have done.
Yeah.
It's now 2 years down the line.
Yeah. Well, look, we were talking about just that thing earlier. Monzo was born in the cloud, right? They had no agenda, nothing at all. They could build brand new systems. The big problem that all of the banks have is that they've been built over the last 150 years, and they've got huge silos of technology that they have to work with containing our data, and it's incredibly hard for them to move at speed and to connect it together. It is nuts, isn't it? You'd think as a consumer, you'd look at that and go, why isn't Lloyds doing that? You know, why can't I get that? But it's incredibly hard for them to do, and that's why they call it the mice nibbling at the cheese of the big banks, don't they? Because these challenger banks are coming in and they're setting the precedent, but they're doing it through giving you an incredible consumer experience. Yeah, and the minimum viable product, of course, what they then did was they're now asking their consumers about the experience, and every time you use it, they're gathering the data so they can see how you're using it. You don't get any of that with First Direct. I'm online on First Direct. I just get a PDF of my statement. There's no interaction there. There's no idea about why I'm going there, what I want to do with it. But on Monzo, they're gathering all that data, and that's the ultimate kind of, you know, tethering of a subscription service to a product to make it really interesting and much more tailored to you. Yeah, that's a lesson for anyone, I think, in any industry about how to do it. I mean, they've done it brilliantly. Whether they'll succeed in the long term is another matter, because of course they only have a limited range of products, right? And you need FCA approval, don't you, to launch different products, and I think operating current accounts is much more complicated than savings accounts, blah blah blah, right? So there's a lot for them to do, but this is happening out there, right? So, loads of interesting stuff going on, right, that I think is changing the world around us. How am I doing for time? Am I?
Yeah.
I'm okay? Yeah. The big point I think right at the start though is those are really big stories about stuff that's going on around the world. How can we do it here? How can you do it in AMC? And this is where I've started to look at what my customers are doing and understanding how they're going on their digital journey, which hopefully might be useful, useful to understand in different industries. So, really quick on this one. This is one of my favourite customers, a company called Eaststone. Now, Eaststone do a really, really interesting business. So these guys, they're very small, only 100 people. And what they do is if you're a child or an old person with swallowing difficulties, sometimes you can't take prescription tablet medicine. So what they do in an unlicensed way is they turn the tablet into a liquid. And then send it to you so that you can take that medicine. Really fascinating little business. Start up about 10 years ago, and it's absolutely flying. Doing a great business. What they've done, and we did this work with them, is we've moved their entire business into the cloud, and it makes them incredibly flexible. So, on their phone, they can get every single bit of information they need to do their job. Because all the data sets have been sorted out, they're all running in the cloud, and it means that they are incredibly flexible. You think about what Peter talked about earlier about popping down to the exchange and being able to move your phone from here to there. You imagine if you took that up another level, and everything that you wanted you could securely access from this and do your work on that, right? It's now actually a very common thing that businesses are doing as a kind of, the first approach to this is just enabling the workforce to be much more mobile. Another good example in your sector, so I worked on this project quite closely with the team earlier this year, the BT pension scheme, which of course has had loads of grief over the last year or so, is the largest pension fund in the UK, and it's run just over the road down there. And these guys have done exactly the same thing. So they were coming out of an outsourcing arrangement that wasn't working very well for them and relocating to another location. And they decided to put the whole pension scheme administration up in the cloud. So it's now running with, it's actually using Microsoft technology, so it's 365, and it's, all of the Microsoft collaboration services and Skype are all just intuitively used. But they've also moved a lot of their application stack into the public cloud as well. So the apps can talk to each other and they can build and develop faster. Daisy last year delivered a really interesting project with our partners Vodafone into Morrison's. And this one was about Wi-Fi. So, everywhere you go now you get Wi-Fi, right? But in Morrison's last year, there was a big project to roll public Wi-Fi out across all Morrison's stores. So when you walk into Morrison's, it'll ask you if you want to connect to the Wi-Fi, you accept the terms and conditions, important one. If you accept the terms and conditions, then you can get access to free Wi-Fi. What's interesting about this is the potential of what Morrison's can do with this to improve the shopping experience for you as consumers. So initially they're just using it because they think it's a really good thing to attract shoppers to come through the door in Morrison's, but there is the capability in the service, if you say yes to the service and if you read the T's and C's, to then track your movements around the store. And to see where you idle, how long you go to certain places for, and then to take all of that, apply AI algorithms to it to improve the merchandising and the shopping experience. There are other clever things you could do with that. So for example, trying to fuse together the online shopping experience with the in-store shopping experience. So click and collect, that would be a good example. So if you've gone online and you've done a click and collect, what about if as soon as you walk into the store or as soon as you park your car you connect to the Wi-Fi and it notifies the store that you've arrived and they prepare it and they're there waiting for you when you walk in and they can identify it's you, right? Yeah, these sorts of things are pretty small things, but actually they could really improve the experience. Bricks and mortar with the clicks, clicks and mortar they call it, don't they?
What's going on there?
So this one here is this is I've cheated here actually. This isn't from Morrison's, but what this is in an exhibition centre, and in a very similar way, Wi-Fi access points all over the place, and what it's doing is it's monitoring where users are. So these densities are users moving around the conference centre. So it's showing you that there's something really interesting happening there, right? That's where everybody is. Maybe that's where the keynote speech is going on, and it moves over time, but it's just one slice of the data, right? But if you think about what we can collect on this, we can collect not just the fact that we can get things like what phone are you using? What version of software are you using? Accessing the GPS information, so whereabouts are you? It actually uses geolocation between the access points to find where you are, and there are a surprising number of things you can do actually with the data that you get from this. You then get the computers to look at it and the data scientists to look at it, and you can create quite interesting services. I think you've got to be very careful about this as well, because you can get to this kind of creepy line, can't you? At what point do you start to do things that actually make you a bit uncomfortable? Because you just accepted terms and conditions and suddenly being tracked, right? I think there's a lot of things we need to think about there around the morality of some of this and how we deal with it. But yeah, it's happening now, right? Let's be very clear. If you've accepted one of those free Wi-Fi's in Westfield Shopping Centre or something like that, they're probably doing a bunch of that to you now. And you may or may not know it, but if you look at the T's and C's, you've probably accepted that it's okay for them to harvest this data, to use it in some way. I love this one. So this has been I exec sponsor Costain. Do everyone know Costain? The name Costain? Builders. Yeah, that's what everyone says. They're builders, right? They're trying to change that perception. They want to be known as a technology construction business, right? For obvious reasons, because the construction business is being completely transformed by all of the technologies that we've talked about in a very, very significant way. And we've been really closely involved with Costain. So Costain, they're a 3 billion UK business. They run contracts like HS2. They've been doing Crossrail. They build bridges. Basically, their pitch is, give us something really, really hard in critical national infrastructure and we'll do it. So they're good at managing big projects and big risk. I just wanted to play a quick video if I can.
I like reliable journeys, which is why I love smart motorways. For a start, they use technology to read the traffic flow. So when it's busy, they can change the speed limit. You can see it on the digital signs above the lane. And if there's a red X above the lane, you can't use it. Even I can see that. So all we've got to do is follow the signs, stick within the speed limits, and thanks to Highways England, we all get where we're going. Smart. To find out more, search online for smart motorways.
So have any of you been on a smart motorway? Have any of you been stuck in a queue as they're building a smart motorway? M1, M6, M5, right, they're happening everywhere. And this was kind of a Highways England thing, and Costain manage 60% of the smart motorways in the UK on behalf of Highways England. But why build a smart motorway? Get the numbers right. Did you know that to widen a motorway, it costs £80 million a mile, but to implement a smart motorway costs £5 million a mile. As good as a taxpayer. But when you implement a smart motorway, rather than widening the motorway, on average, you see a 27% reduction in your journey time. There are 80% less accidents and 10% less pollution. That's quite good, isn't it? I'd buy that ROI. I'd sign that one off at the board. So you might not like them, but actually, they're really interesting. And what they're doing, I think, is they are looking at a real problem we got in the UK. We're a packed island, right? And the problem we've got with all of our critical infrastructure is it's at capacity. It's at capacity, whether you're looking at anything, whether it's water, electricity, broadband, bridges, roads, whatever. Yeah, there's too many people on it, too many people using it, and it's at capacity. And what technology is doing in all of these spaces is it's enabling more smart and better use of capacity, which means you don't have to necessarily build new. You can reutilise what you have and get more out of it. That's really what the Costain story is all about. What's interesting behind it, though, I think, is they've really plotted their course to get better at technology. And the reason they've done it is because their clients, and their clients are, Highways England, Network Rail, those sorts of organisations, have this problem with capacity. And the only way they can solve that capacity problem is with technology and good construction. So what Costain have done is they've, as well as delivered a construction model, they've also really been investing in the platforms and the people and the capability to be able to do technology with it. I'll give you a really interesting example. So on the Crossrail project that's come not far from here probably, One of the things that happens when you tunnel underneath a big city like London is you can get subsidence, right? Which you really don't want. So if you're going under a building and you don't prop it up properly, it may collapse. So what they've had to do with tunnelling Crossrail is they've had to build, ahead of the tunnelling, they've had to build like a fabric, a structure of concrete under the ground that goes on top of the tunnel. So they dig these holes and they fill them with concrete, and then they can tunnel underneath because they kind of shored up the ground underneath it. But Costain had a theory that what about if that's completely unnecessary, because the ground's so solid and we're tunnelling at a certain depth and we won't need to put that concrete in because it's massively expensive, slows everything down, it's really unenvironmentally friendly because concrete's really bad for CO2 emissions. What can we do? So what they've been doing is they've been working with Cambridge University, and they've been getting these fibre optic cables and they've been wrapping them around buildings and measuring movement, something they call the engineers call tensile stress. And they built a model with algorithms that says that as they tunnel underneath, they're watching the algorithm and they're saying, what's the tensile stress of the building? And they've got a model, a very safe model, that says if the tensile stress exceeds a certain level, then we need to put the concrete in. But if it doesn't, we can drill under and there'll be no impact. So they've just started that approach with tunnelling, right? What's interesting about that is it's an application of technology in a building, but you think behind it, could they do that if they hadn't put in place that stuff in the background, right? The developers, the platforms, the infrastructure that enables them to do it, that enables them to think differently. And of course, what that now enables them to do is when there's a tunnelling project going on, they go, look here, 40% less cost on my tunnelling project because of this innovation that I put in. So that's the stuff that we're seeing happening in the construction industry. We did a project with them that moved them all onto a really mobile environment. So they can now access everything from mobile, which is quite cool. But not only that, they've also started to then use that platform to do some really cool stuff. One of the things they're doing is pothole maintenance. So they've got a website, and you can go onto the website if you get a pothole, take a photo of it, upload it, and then they'll go and fix the pothole for the council without it really touching the council services. This one here, the pumping station of the future. So what they're doing here is they're working on big projects with the electricity companies around gas compressors, and rather than just servicing a gas compressor, they're putting sensors into the gas compressors to provide a much tighter service for how that gas compressor service works. And the really big one that they're doing, that they're all over at the moment, is this thing about electrification and autonomous vehicles. They're about to start a pilot, which you'll hear a lot about in the news, where for the first time they're driving a vehicle completely autonomously from London to Paris. It's going to happen next year, and they're doing all of the roadside work to enable that to happen. But what I find fascinating about this is that it's looking at really how we solve a very big problem, because as we move towards electrification, while we may be using less fuel, actually we probably don't have the capacity in the UK's electricity generation market to charge all those cars and to charge them at the same time. You know the problems you get when everyone turns their kettle on at the half time in a football match or something, right? That kind of idea. You imagine it in cars where you're draining huge amounts. So one of the things they're doing is working very closely between the electricity generators and the roads and the car companies, and pulling data sets together to see how we solve that problem. So how do we not only build charging stations, but how do we then really understand about usage, and how do we then work together across all of these environments to build a better solution? So they're doing loads of stuff. Sanger, one of my favourites, just because they're a wonderful organisation. So I'm aware I'm over time. I love this one. So Sanger is a great British institution, right, based up in Cambridge. Really, we should be really proud of these guys, because you know the Human Genome Project, and we cracked the human genome, didn't we, for the first time a few years ago. These guys ran 2/3 of the global effort to crack the human genome in the UK. They're brilliant. And we had a very, very small part to play in that. We provide the networks for them. But what the networks allow them to do is run data around between their scientists much, much faster. So that apparently, if you go back 20 years, if you wanted to analyse DNA, it would cost you £1.2 million to sample DNA. Nowadays, you can do it instantly and it costs a few pence. So the speed at which we can look at at a genome level, at a DNA level, and then develop drugs has just dramatically changed, which is, I think, is great for humankind, right, for developing drugs. There's another company we work with. They're rather unpopular in some places, Care UK, because they're taking a lot of private contracts with the NHS, so they run treatment centres and care homes and that sort of thing. They've got a really interesting innovation that we've been involved just on the edges of, called WellWatch. And this is a product that's a Samsung Gear 4 wearable, and given out to old people on a subscription, and it uses all of the sensors in the wearable, so that if an old person falls, or if they slump, or if something else happens, then the algorithms will pick that up centrally, and it enables them to deliver a more effective service using a wearable. But again, it's, underneath that, there's been an investment in the platforms, in the infrastructure, in the development skills to enable them to deliver services like that I think make a difference and that move care forwards. Last but not least,
I've got the care notes up here as we speak on the iPad. I can click on the patient, and we've got 4G here as well. So the patient has come up. Now, I've got a variety of information here that is useful to me. So my immediate first thing really would be to look at the notes, because I want to see when the last time that patient was seen, what was going on, what the last health professional would have made of that patient. So this particular patient, it said that they didn't attend their appointment yesterday. However, the CAD that we got in had said that they were potentially suicidal. And so I'm wondering, why didn't they attend their appointment yesterday? What's going on with that? So now I've got all of that background information, we can go and see the patient with the security that I know when they were last seen, what the risk is that we're walking into, and some of their other history that's going on.
Since the triage system's been running, it's been not only obviously beneficial to us as an officer. Before, we used to have to rely on our police powers to deal with issues surrounding mental health. It necessarily wasn't the appropriate thing to do. We were maybe taking people into custody because we had no other services we could tap into. Where by now we work closely with the triage team, the triage nurse specifically, and they're obviously there to support us with the decisions we make, and vice versa. We support each other. But I've got that expertise right at my hand.
Really lovely video of a really simple project we delivered with Sussex Mental Health Care Trust down on the south coast, based in Worthing, second biggest mental health care trust in the UK. A scenario that often occurs is somebody with a mental health condition who's taking a drug. If they stop taking the drug, they can have an episode, a psychotic episode, something like that. A lot of the people that have psychotic episodes when they go off their drug regime are arrested by the police and they're put in a holding cell overnight, and it makes their condition infinitely worse. So what they've done is they put these little mobile teams of nurses around the area that they serve, and they've got mobiles. They've got tablets that are secure. And what they do now is they work very closely with the police. So the video shows a policeman and a care worker in the police car driving around Eastbourne. And it's a really simple thing, right? So the police get called about someone who's had an episode. The nurse and the policeman go up to the person. The nurse can instantly access the patient record of that person, understand what their situation is. They've got prescription drugs on hand. They can give the person the drug, calm them down, and avoid them going into custody. Just great, right? But it's a really simple example about how using mobile technology and thinking about process, you can really do something good. They've done another really interesting one recently as well. So they've just started a collaboration with the University of Brighton down the road, and they've got PhD students and MSc students in Brighton working on the data sets in Sussex Mental Health Care Trust to do interesting things. Their first app they've just come out with is quite cool. It's really simple. So if you're in one of the high intensity wards in the hospital and somebody has an episode, a violent episode, what the clinicians will have to do is give that person a very heavy dose of a sedative to knock them out, to calm everything down. Trouble is, when you do that, the person has to be monitored quite closely, and there's a different protocol, a different regime for monitoring them. Developed an app for that. So when they give it out, there's an app, and it will notify that care worker that they need to be monitoring that person every 10 minutes. Really simple intervention. Doesn't have massive amounts of development behind it, but it's little things around the outside that are changing the way the service works, based on, you know, investment in platform, investment in infrastructure, and so on. I think those are all my stories. I just wanted to wrap up, if I can, just by having a quick think about, you know, how at AMC might you start to think about approaching this. And when I've been around, you know, the meeting CIOs and business leaders in my customers, these are the kind of things I generally see when customers like Costain get it right. I think one of the things they have, is kind of this approach, right? So people talk about a digital strategy. I don't think there's such a thing as a digital strategy. I think that's your business strategy. Right at the top of the business, your CEO and so on, right? If their business strategy recognises the opportunity in technology and really promotes technology and the investment in technology, then that's a really good starting point. Without that, it's quite hard to do it. What we then see businesses doing is they use technology and technology leadership to challenge everything. So you say it to the business. You say, right, in every area of our business, let's have a think about how could we use data, how could we use technology to improve what we're doing, and actually get people on the ground to be thinking about the innovation and feeding it back. Strong technology leadership, without a doubt. The Costain CIO, you know, really strong. The Sussex Mental Health Care Trust CIO, really strong. Got a lot of respect on the board, is on the board with the CEO, and is providing that voice to provide that change. But they're great at executing, obviously, because that's critical for everyone, right? The last bit, though, is the foundations, and I've been talking a bit about this, and this is really a little pitch for Daisy, right? So, Burj Khalifa, anyone been there? Pretty amazing building, right? Tallest building in the world, still, is it? Or yeah. I think it's still. I think they're getting there in Mecca, aren't they, or something? Or
Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi, is it? Yeah. Reason I've shown this is before I got into tech, I was a geophysicist and quite interested in what goes on under the ground. When they built the Burj Khalifa, this is an early picture of it. They built the Burj Khalifa in a desert, right? And down to 50 metres, there was sand and soft sandstone. So it wasn't like granite they're going into, right? It's sand and soft sandstone. And it's also a seismically active area where they get little earthquakes, right? Not a great place to build the tallest building in the world. So massive technology innovation came in here. What they did is they, if you imagine an upturned hairbrush kind of sitting in the sand. So they built this massive concrete platform, and then they drilled really deep holes underneath the platform, and they filled them with concrete. So it's this kind of, it's like that. So it's almost like a platform floating on the sand that the Burj Khalifa is built on, right? The reason I tell you that is that beautiful buildings like the Burj Khalifa need strong foundations, and it's the same with digital businesses. So if you want to do digital and do it well, you've got to invest in the infrastructure and the foundations to do it. And that's really what we do. So we do everything in the network, connecting from data centers all the way out to these things and all the connectivity. Connecting your business, kind of building a bridge between your business's data centers and the cloud, so you can access all that wonderful artificial intelligence and all those things. We do that. And last but not least, this thing about the agile workforce. So how do we equip you with tools so you can just be more mobile and just make working easier, like the example that Peter told? That's kind of what we do. We've got lots of ingredients, but yeah, the big one is you can do it. Dream big, right? And there's great opportunities out there if you just think about it and get together and think about what you can do with your data, how to put your customers first, and then use technology to, you know, to complement your products and your services today. Thanks.
Thanks.